The first slice bled. Not red frosting. Not raspberry filling. Blood. Actual blood. I didn't believe it at first. I thought maybe it was some prank. Maybe the baker had some sick sense of humor. But as the thick, dark fluid trickled down the blade and pooled at the base of the cake stand, I felt my hands start to shake. The room didn't spin. It tilted, off balance, like something inside reality had cracked, just slightly, and I was the only one who noticed. I looked up. No one else had seen it. Not yet. They were all still smiling, clapping, laughing, like a perfect wedding scene clipped from a glossy magazine. My groom, Ezra, squeezed my waist, waiting for me to feed him the first bite. The photographer's camera flashed. I glanced down again. The slice was bleeding more now. It was pooling around the silver cake cutter like a wound that couldn't close. Why wasn't anyone reacting? Why couldn't I speak? My voice caught in my throat like barbed wire. My lips curled into a smile on instinct, but it wasn't real. Inside, I was screaming. I pressed the slice against the tiny dessert plate, but the blood seeped out from the sides like it had veins. Veins. In cake. I wanted to run, but I didn't, because this wasn't just my wedding. It was a performance. One I had begged for, planned for, suffered for, and now I stood in the middle of it, center stage, cutting into something that should never have bled. I held the plate out to Ezra. "Here," I said, my voice trembling. He laughed, not noticing. "What's the filling?" "Cherry." He bit down. I watched his expression change. Not horror, not confusion, just pause. He looked at me, swallowed, and then turned back to the crowd. "Delicious." Delicious? There was blood in it. Or was there? I looked down again. The rest of the cake was normal. Pure white frosting. Pink layers. No bleeding. No smell of iron. Did I imagine it? No. My hand was still stained. I wiped it on the inside of my gown, smudging red streaks across the silk lining. My mind looped over what I'd just seen. Did I hallucinate? Is this a panic attack? No. I know what I saw, but no one else did. And worse, no one else was going to believe me. They say you know something's wrong before your brain does. That your body tells the truth even when your mind tries to lie. That night, while guests danced under strings of fairy lights and jazz played over the lawn, I locked myself in the bridal suite. I scrubbed the blood off my fingers until my knuckles went raw. Except, by then, it wasn't there anymore. Not a drop. No stain. No proof. I stared at my reflection. Not a mirror. Just the window, black like a portal, and whispered to myself, it was real. It was real. But what if it wasn't? What if I imagined it? What if this was just another episode? The truth is, I hadn't slept in 3 nights. Not since the letter came. A handwritten envelope with no return address. Delivered by hand to my apartment the week before the wedding. Inside was a photo. Blurry. Grainy. Me and Ezra. Walking out of the florist shop. On the back, someone had written, "He's not who you think he is." Just that. No signature. No explanation. I showed it to no one. Not even Ezra. Because I wanted to believe it was a prank. I wanted to believe he was who I thought he was. But that night, after the cake bled and Ezra didn't flinch, I wasn't sure anymore. The next morning I woke up alone. Ezra had said something about an early errand, needing to pick something up before the honeymoon. He kissed my forehead and left before sunrise. But he didn't take his phone, and his suitcase was still by the door. And by noon he hadn't come back. The hotel staff said no one saw him leave. My messages went unanswered. My calls went straight to voicemail. And the bakery? When I finally reached them to ask about the cake, they told me something that made my stomach turn inside out. They never made a red velvet layer. They don't use any red fillings. And they certainly don't make cakes that bleed. What was inside the cake? And where the hell was Ezra? By the time I called the bakery again, I was already shaking. Half from fear, half from something deeper. Something raw and ancient, like betrayal burrowed into my bones. The woman on the other end was polite, cheerful even. We sent a 3-tier vanilla sponge with lavender frosting and lemon curd filling. she said, reciting the order as if it were etched in stone. Are you sure? I asked. No chocolate, no red velvet, no cherry? A pause, just long enough for suspicion to creep in. No, ma'am, she said, her tone dimming slightly. Your fiancé specifically requested no red. He said you were allergic. I almost dropped the phone, because I'm not allergic to anything, and I never told him I was. Why would Ezra lie about something so specific and so unnecessary? Unless I ended the call, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the half-packed suitcase by the door. Something in my chest twisted like a fist clenched too tight. I didn't know the man I married. Not really. Flashback. 3 weeks before the wedding, I found Ezra standing in the kitchen at 3:12 a.m., lights off, staring at the stove like it had whispered something to him. I remember the eerie glow of the digital clock painting his face in dull red. I asked what he was doing. He didn't answer right away. When he finally turned to me, his eyes were vacant. I was sleepwalking, he mumbled. Go back to bed, honey. But the stove was warm, and there was blood on his palm. He said it was from a nosebleed. I wanted to believe that, so I did, because love is a kind of self-inflicted blindness, isn't it? By the afternoon of the missing groom, I called his mother. She hadn't heard from him since the rehearsal dinner. Sounded surprised to even get my call. She thought we were already on the flight to Santorini. We're not, I said, my voice cracking. He's gone. He left. Or something happened. I don't know. She was quiet a moment, then asked, Did you cut the cake yet? My blood ran cold. What? She repeated herself. Did you cut the wedding cake? I felt the breath leave my lungs. Yes, I whispered. Then silence on her end, like a vacuum swallowing sound. And then click. She hung up. Who asks that? Who hears their son is missing on his wedding night and asks about cake? I stared at the phone in disbelief. I wanted to call her back, scream, demand answers, but I didn't, because a darker thought was blooming in the back of my mind now, like mold under wallpaper. What if she knew something? What if the cake? The bleeding was never a mistake. At dusk, I went back to the ballroom. The staff had cleared everything out. Tables stripped, chairs stacked, flowers wilting in buckets of leftover water. But the cake table was still there, and so was the cake, or what was left of it. The top tier was gone. So was the slice Ezra ate. But the rest of the cake remained. Undisturbed, pristine, almost too perfect. I stared at it. Was it still bleeding? My hand hovered over the knife again. I didn't want to touch it. I dreaded touching it. But something inside me, the same thing that made me open the letter, the same thing that whispered he's not who you think, pushed me forward. I sliced again. Clean. No blood. No fluid. Just sponge and frosting. I sagged with relief and confusion. Was it all in my head? Had my anxiety finally devoured reality? I backed away slowly. That's when I noticed the stain on the floor behind the table. Dark, sticky, red, leading somewhere. Not dripping, not smeared, trailed, like someone or something had walked away bleeding. I followed it. The trail led to the back of the venue, through the kitchen, past trays of uneaten hors d'oeuvres and abandoned ice sculptures, into a hallway I hadn't been in before. A door stood slightly ajar. I pushed it open and found a freezer. Inside was a small, unmarked cake box, not part of our order, not on any table during the reception. I reached in, heart pounding, and pulled it out. The box was cold, damp with condensation, and heavier than it should have been. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single-tier cake, identical design to ours, but with something buried inside. A corner of cloth, white and stiff with blood, protruded from the base like someone had tried to hide it but gave up halfway. I peeled the cake apart, fingers trembling, frosting clinging to my nails. Then I screamed, because inside, wrapped in blood-soaked satin, was a torn fragment of a bride's veil, and a shriveled, severed finger still wearing a diamond engagement ring. Not mine. Someone else's. Who did this belong to? And why was it hidden inside a cake that looked exactly like mine? I dropped the box. It hit the floor with a dull, sickening thud. Not the sound of cake, but something heavier, meatier. The frosting smeared across the tile in grotesque streaks. But my eyes were locked on the one thing that didn't belong there. The finger. Small, pale, withered. The nail still faintly pink under chipped polish. The diamond ring glinted under the freezer's flickering light, like it was mocking me. It wasn't mine, but it could have been. It almost was. My stomach twisted. I staggered backward, hit the wall, and slid to the floor, trying to catch my breath. There was no mistaking it now. I hadn't imagined the bleeding cake. I hadn't hallucinated the trail. Something sick, something planned, had been hidden at the very center of this ceremony. And Ezra? He was gone. Vanished hours ago. Right after the cake was cut. Right after I bled. I stared at that severed finger and thought about the letter again. He's not who you think he is. Those words weren't a threat. They were a warning. And I had ignored it. I pulled my phone from the table and snapped a photo of the ring. My fingers were trembling, but I forced them to focus. I zoomed in, praying for something, anything, that might tell me whose hand this used to be. There were initials engraved inside the band. LM plus EP. The E made my skin crawl. Ezra, of course. But who the hell was Elam? Flashback. 2 months ago, we walked past a bakery window. Ezra stopped to admire a wedding cake display. 3 tiers, delicate lace fondant, tiny sugared roses at the base. I joked that he looked more excited about the cake than the wedding. He turned to me and said, dead serious. Cakes are where truth hides. I laughed at the time. I shouldn't have. That night I didn't sleep. I lay curled in the middle of our honeymoon suite. Ezra's suitcase still untouched. His tux draped over the chair, smelling faintly of wood smoke and the cologne I bought him. Every creak of the hallway outside made my chest tighten. Every flicker of the hallway light felt like a pulse. I called the police, told them I'd found something suspicious, didn't mention the cake, didn't mention the bleeding. I said I'd found a human finger inside a box that didn't belong to me. They arrived an hour later. But when we opened the freezer, the box was gone. So was the stain. So was the trail. It was like someone had scrubbed time clean. The officers took my statement, nodded politely, and left without taking a single photo. I could tell they didn't believe me. Worse, they were used to people like me. Stressed brides, cold feet, wedding nerves. They'd heard it all before. They didn't see the blood. They didn't see what Ezra left behind. But I did. And someone else knew, too. The next morning, an envelope was slid under my door. No address, no stamp, just a single line written in dark ink. She made the same mistake. Look at July 2021. My hands shook as I opened my laptop. I searched Wedding Disappearance July 2021 and braced myself. It didn't take long. There it was. Lydia Monroe. Age, 28. Engaged to Elias Preston. Disappeared on her wedding day. Ceremony canceled an hour before guests arrived. The fiancé never showed. Lydia was last seen wearing her bridal gown, waiting alone at the altar. The venue, Renvale Estate. The same estate where I was married. The article ended with a line that chilled me. Her cake had already been delivered. I clicked on the photo attached to the article. It was grainy, but there was Ezra, standing behind Lydia, holding her hand, smiling. Ezra didn't just vanish. He repeats. He finds women, lives with them, makes them believe, then disappears, like a shadow that only pretended to be a man. He wasn't Ezra Pierce. He was Elias Preston. And he was engaged to someone else just 3 years ago. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. No words, just a picture of me, cutting the cake, blood pouring down the knife. And in the background, a blurred reflection of someone watching from the hallway. Tall, lean, wearing the same tux Ezra wore last night. But his face wasn't right. It wasn't Ezra. It was older, distorted, almost like a copy of a copy. Familiar, but wrong. Was it even him at all? Had I ever known who he was? My chest tightened. A cold wave of dread rolled through me. I wasn't just chasing a missing husband now. I was chasing a ghost. Pattern. A ritual. And I had been chosen. The bleeding cake wasn't an accident. It was a signal. I stared at Lydia's photo until my vision blurred. She had kind eyes. The kind of smile that looked like it belonged to someone who still believed in love. And like me, she disappeared on her wedding day. No, she almost disappeared. Only she didn't vanish physically. She was erased. No interviews. No family comments. No follow-up articles. Like the world had agreed to forget she existed. But I couldn't forget. Because I was next. I called the venue. The manager, a polished woman named Ms. Holbrook, remembered me instantly. Oh yes, the Caldwell Pierce wedding. Such an elegant affair. I didn't correct her on the name. Ezra always liked the name Pierce. Said it sounded clean. I asked about Lydia. There was silence on the other end. Then a cough. I'm not sure what you're referring to. July 2021. A woman named Lydia Monroe. She was supposed to be married here. Her fiancé disappeared. Same venue. Same setup. Same cake company. Still silence. Then, flatly, I'm afraid I can't discuss past clients. Something about her tone wasn't evasive, it was instructed. Like someone had already warned her. Or paid her. I thanked her and ended the call. But not before she whispered. So soft I almost didn't catch it. Don't follow the trail. It doesn't end where you think. I spent the next hours unraveling the mystery of Lydia Monroe. Her social media accounts were deactivated. No wedding registry. No bridal website. Not even a mention in her hometown newspaper after July 2021. But I found her college friend, Miranda Eltson, through a tagged photo buried deep in a forgotten blog post. I messaged her. At first, she didn't respond. Then, at 2:14 a.m., a voice memo came through. I listened in the dark, every word falling like a hammer on glass. You're not the first to ask, and you won't be the last. Lydia was my best friend. We picked out her dress together. I helped her write her vows. She didn't run. She was taken. He wasn't real, you know? Her fiancé. He gave a fake name. Used prepaid phones. Had no real job. Every trace of him disappeared 2 days before the wedding. But Lydia, static crackled for a moment. She was never found. Not whole. We found pieces. A shoe in the woods. Her engagement ring jammed between floorboards in the bridal suite. And the cake. A pause. A sharp breath. It bled too. I didn't sleep after that. I opened my laptop and pulled up my wedding footage. The raw feed, taken from a stationary camera pointed at the cake table. It was all there, the clapping, the laughter, the first slice. I watched myself hesitate, blade trembling in my hand. Then I saw Ezra, leaning in, whispering something to me. The camera caught no sound, but I read his lips. 2 words. She's watching. I paused the video, rewound, slowed it. Yes, that's what he said. She's watching. Who? I scanned the background, and then I saw it. In the back corner of the reception hall, behind a sheer curtain, was a shadow. Not quite visible. Not moving. Just present. Like something left there to witness. Not to celebrate, but to observe. The next morning, I went back to Renvale Estate. They weren't expecting me. I told them I forgot something in the dressing room. The new manager was a man this time. Stern, square-jawed. The kind of man who didn't ask too many questions if you looked desperate enough. I went straight to the bridal suite. But I didn't go inside. I went to the closet behind the bathroom. Because Miranda's voice kept echoing in my mind. Her engagement ring was jammed between floorboards. I dropped to my knees and began prying at the edges with a nail file. 15 minutes later, I found it. Not a ring, but something else. A photograph. Old. Slightly yellowed. It was Lydia, her face radiant, veil perfectly arranged. Standing beside her, Ezra, smiling. But this photo wasn't digital. It wasn't printed from a phone. It was a Polaroid. The timestamp in faded ink read, July 17th, 2021. My heart hammered as I flipped it over. On the back, in faint pencil, Every cake has a filling. This one has fear. I stood in the middle of that dusty closet, still crouched, knees bruising on splintered wood, and realized something that made my spine go ice cold. He didn't want to be remembered, but someone else did. Someone had been watching him, leaving clues, preserving artifacts like trophies in a game no one agreed to play. Flashback. A week before the wedding, Ezra asked me what I feared most. I told him the dark. He smiled. The dark doesn't lie. It just keeps secrets for people who do. I thought he was being poetic. Now, I think he was confessing. On the drive back from Renvale, I got another message. This one was a video. No sender. Just a file. I hit play. The footage was old, grainy. Shot at night. A flashlight flickering. Heavy breathing. Then, a wedding cake. Sitting in the middle of a field. Alone. And beside it, a woman in a torn gown. Face hidden under her veil. Hands stained red. The video glitched once. Then ended. Underneath the video, a final line. Your vows were heard. And they were accepted. I threw the phone against the passenger seat and gripped the wheel until my knuckles went white. My wedding wasn't a beginning. It was an offering. And the bleeding cake. It was the first sign that someone had accepted it. Who is watching us? And why does the cake always bleed before someone disappears? The video haunted me. That faceless bride. That cake left in an open field. Those blood-stained hands that didn't tremble. There was no logic to it. No narrative. Just terror captured like a scream in a jar. But the worst part wasn't what I saw. It was the line beneath it. Your vows were heard. And they were accepted. Accepted by whom? Accepted for what? I didn't go back to my apartment. Couldn't. Every room reminded me of Ezra. His jacket still slung over the coat rack. His toothbrush beside mine. The list of wedding vendors magnet to the fridge in his handwriting. No, I needed to go where he never touched. Where his presence would feel alien. I went to my sister's house. Didn't explain. Didn't ask. I just showed up. And for once, Layla didn't ask questions. She took one look at me. Smeared makeup, blistered lips from biting, eyes bloodshot from hours of unanswered questions, and said, "You can stay as long as you need." I slept for 14 hours straight. But peace didn't come. Because when I woke, something was waiting. Not Ezra. Not a shadow. But a name. Colm Weston. I didn't know where it came from. I woke with it echoing like a scream through a hallway. And I knew instinctively it was connected. I typed it into my search bar. A single article appeared. Obituary. Colm Weston, age 52. Found dead in his bakery. Cause of death. Unknown. Date. July 18, 2021. The day after Lydia Monroe's wedding was supposed to happen. My stomach dropped. The bakery? Same one that delivered my cake. He was the owner. And he died after the bleeding cake. The article was short, as if someone wanted it buried. No comments. No follow-ups. No statements from family or business partners. But the obituary included one chilling detail. A slice of cake was found beside the body. Red-streaked. Uncut. I leaned back in the chair, trembling. Whatever this thing was, it didn't stop at the bride. It didn't stop at Ezra. It reached further. Deeper. It marked everyone who touched the ritual. I emailed the bakery. No reply. I called again. This time, someone answered. A young voice. Nervous. This is Ella. We're closed today. But don't hang up, I said quickly. Please. I just need to ask about your wedding cakes. Do you know what happened to Colm Weston? A pause. Then, in a whisper, they told us not to talk about it. They told us never to mention the blood. I swallowed hard. Who told you that? Another pause. And then, the woman in the veil. I froze. What woman? But she'd already hung up. Flashback. 2 nights before the wedding, I had a dream. Ezra was gone. I stood alone in the garden outside the venue, fog crawling around my ankles. And there, by the edge of the roses, stood a woman in white, veil covering her face, hands clasped like she was praying. When I tried to speak, her head twitched violently, Once, twice, like a puppet on strings. And then she whispered, "You said yes. That means you're hers now." I woke up screaming. Ezra held me and said I was just nervous. But now I wonder, was that dream a memory or a warning? The next afternoon, I returned to the venue. I knew they wouldn't let me in, so I didn't ask. I waited in my car until twilight, until the last car pulled out of the gravel lot, until the lights shut off in the main house. Then I snuck around the side through the overgrown hedge path leading to the old chapel, the one no one uses anymore. Layla and I had explored it when we first toured the venue. She joked it looked haunted. I remember Ezra looking too long at the altar. Now, I pushed open the rotting doors and slipped inside. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Wood groaned under my feet. The pews were cracked. The stained glass windows smeared with ash and time. And in the center of the aisle was a table. A single tier cake sat on top. No frosting, no design, just sponge, dry, crumbling, and sitting beside it, place card. My name, scrawled in black ink, Marin. Not Mrs. Pierce, not bride, just my name, like I was being summoned. I stepped closer, and that's when I noticed the floor beneath the table, etched into the old wood, not with a knife, but with fingernails. I dropped to my knees and traced the words with my fingers. She comes when the vows are false. She tastes the lie in the cake. Only truth doesn't bleed. Then I heard the door creak. I turned fast. A figure stood in the entrance, silhouetted by moonlight, thin veil, long dress, bare feet dragging on the wood. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. I blinked, and she was gone. Was she Lydia? Or someone else? Someone older? Someone forgotten? Back at Layla's, I found a package on the doorstep, wrapped in white silk. No name, no address. Inside, a piece of wedding cake half-eaten. And underneath it, a photo of me, sleeping. Who delivered it? The photo was taken from the foot of the bed. I was asleep, curled on my side, my hands tucked beneath my cheek like a child, my mouth slightly open, vulnerable. But what made my blood go cold wasn't the angle. It was what was beside me. The nightstand, my phone, my glass of water, the silk ribbon from my wedding bouquet, folded into a perfect bow. I never folded it that way. I never touched it after the wedding. Someone had been in the room while I slept and left behind a piece of the cake. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I sat there with that half-eaten slice trembling in my hands and stared at the delicate white frosting now crusted at the edge. Something was off. A slight smell, iron and almonds. My stomach churned. I wanted to throw it away, burn it, bury it, but I didn't. I had to know, because this wasn't just a haunting. It was a pattern, and patterns leave traces. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom and scraped off the frosting with a spoon, carefully, slowly, each layer revealing more than I wanted. Under the sponge, tucked between the cake's layers, was something hard. I picked it out with tweezers. A tooth. Not a decoration, not sugar-sculpted, human, with a hairline crack across the enamel and the faint brown at the root. I gagged, fell to my knees. Who was this cake made from? Who was I eating? Flashback. The night before the wedding, Ezra had offered to feed me a taste test slice from the caterers. I remember him laughing, sliding it between my lips like a seduction. But that taste, it lingered. I remember the way my tongue recoiled, the strange bitterness under the sweetness. "Is that almond?" I'd asked. He just smiled. Now I knew. It wasn't almond. It was truth. And the truth has a taste. Blood, bone, memory. The next morning, I searched Colm Weston again. No autopsy report. No family statements. But deep in a baking forum from 2020, I found something. A post he'd written. Looking for new cake symbolism ideas. Want to incorporate cultural traditions. Something old, something new, something buried. And someone had replied, anonymously, "Try using teeth. They hold secrets. They keep vows better than people do." Colm replied, That's twisted. I like it. 2 months later, he was dead. I stared at my phone for a long time, then typed a message. To the only person left who might tell me the truth. Miranda Eltson, Lydia's friend. I wrote, I found a tooth in the cake. Was that part of it for Lydia too? She responded instantly. You're not supposed to find it. That's the point. If you find it, she follows you. She wants it back. Her name was once called at an altar, but the groom didn't mean it. She heard the lie, and now, she listens for broken vows. That's what the cake is. A vessel, a body, an invitation. I asked, who is she? The reply, no one knows. Maybe a bride who died. Maybe a god. Maybe just a hunger dressed in white. But once you feed her, she feeds back. And she always leaves something behind. You still have the photo, don't you? I did. I pulled it out. Something was off now. The photo me sleeping had changed. There was something written in the corner now. Faint. Gray like it was appearing through mist. Say the vow again. But mean it this time. I dropped the photo. My skin crawled with heat and cold at once. Every instinct screamed to run. But where could I go? This wasn't a person. This wasn't even Ezra anymore. This was a force. Something that waited for people like me. Who said, I do with doubt in their throat. Who stood at the altar with cracked hearts and trembling smiles. Because she listens to lies dressed as promises. And she waits for the moment the cake is cut. When the truth comes spilling out. I had to get answers. I went back to Renvale. Again. This time I wasn't alone. Layla came with me. I told her everything. Showed her the cake, the photo, the message from Miranda. To her credit, she didn't laugh. She didn't deny. She just said, then let's find out who made the first vow. We broke into the venue at night. The chapel was cold. No table this time. No cake. But in the corner, hidden behind the crumbling altar, we found something old. A book. Leather-bound. Heavy. Covered in dust and wax. No title. But inside, pages and pages of names. Each one listed with a date, a location, and a short note. The earliest entry, Elena Varro, March 3, 1872. Refused the vow. Taken. Hundreds of others followed. Each one tied to a wedding. Each one tied to a bride. And at the very end of the last page, 3 names. Lydia Monroe, July 2021, cake bled. Groom disappeared. Bride incomplete. Colm Weston, July 2021. Fed her wrong. Was fed in return. Marin Caldwell, May 2025, vow tasted false. Next slice pending. Next slice? Pending? Was I the next offering? Or was Layla? Or someone else entirely? Behind me, I heard her whisper. Not Layla. Her. The veil brushed the floor. The cake was cut. And this time, I tasted blood before the knife even touched it. We both screamed. Not out loud. Not with our voices. But inside. That kind of scream. The one that comes from your bones. From somewhere deeper than your lungs can ever reach. A soul-shaking panic that knew something ancient had entered the room. And it didn't care about rules, doors, or time. Because she was there. We didn't see her walk in. She didn't need to. She was just suddenly present. A blur at the edges. A veil moving without wind. Feet that made no sound on the old chapel floor. Layla froze beside me. I tried to move, to speak, to run. But my limbs turned to stone. And the book, that cursed book, slammed shut on its own. The candle we'd lit near the altar blew out without warning. And still that veil floated forward. She didn't speak. But I heard her. Not in words. In memories. Not mine. Hers. Flashes shot through my mind like lightning tearing through a black sky. A church. A white dress. Trembling hands holding trembling hands. I do. Spoken from lips that didn't mean it. Eyes darting to another woman in the crowd. The bride, her watching as love turned to performance. And then the cake. Beautiful. Perfect. Hollow. She sliced it. And it bled. Because it knew. Because she knew. Because truth always finds a way out. She was left at the altar. But not just by her groom. By everyone. They looked away from her grief, from her humiliation, from her slow disintegration into something other. Her body died, but her vow lived on, twisted, cracked, hungering. She became a reflection of the lie that birthed her. Now she watches us, those who say forever without knowing what it means, those who wear the gown but fear the man, those who cut the cake already planning their escape, and those of us who say yes with trembling lips because we want to believe we can love without pain. I blinked. The veil was gone. The chapel was empty again. Layla was shaking. "We have to go," she whispered. "This isn't about Ezra anymore." I nodded, because she was right. Ezra was the bait, not the monster. He was just another false promise. Another vessel delivering me to the altar of someone older, deeper, hungrier. And I had stepped right into her church. We fled the chapel. But when we reached the car, the backseat door was open. Neither of us had opened it. There on the seat was a box, smaller than the cake box before, wrapped in the same silk ribbon from my wedding bouquet. I hesitated. Layla did not. She tore it open and gasped. Inside, a vow card. From our wedding ceremony. My vow, written in my hand, torn, soaked in something dark. At the bottom, scrawled in unfamiliar script. "You didn't mean it, so she will show you what it means to be kept." I sat down on the gravel beside the car. The world swam. I had meant it, hadn't I? Or had I just wanted the pain to end? The loneliness? Ezra made me feel safe, chosen. Was that love? Or desperation in a white dress? Flashback. 3 weeks before the wedding, Ezra had found me crying on the kitchen floor. I told him I wasn't sure I was good enough to be loved forever. He held my face and said, "Then we'll fake it, till we make it." I laughed. Now I wondered if that had been a curse in disguise. We went back to Layla's place. But it wasn't safe anymore. The air inside was thick, like someone had boiled sorrow and let it cool into mist. I checked the windows, locked. I checked the doors, still bolted. But there were footprints on the living room carpet. Wet, bare, leading straight to the bedroom, to the nightstand, to the photo. Only this time, the photo had changed again. I wasn't asleep anymore. I was staring back at the camera, eyes wide, mouth parted, and my hand was raised, holding a piece of cake between my fingers. I hadn't posed like that. I hadn't even been awake. But she had moved me, touched me, made me part of her ritual. Layla said we needed to burn it. All of it, the photo, the box, the book. Maybe she was right. But something inside me whispered, burning won't undo the vow. The only way out is to finish it. So I went back to the wedding venue. Alone. One final time. The cake table was still there. A single candle burned beside it. No matches. No wind. Just the flickering light of a ceremony still happening, even after the guests were long gone. I sat, folded my hands, and whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was saying. I said forever, but I was scared. I said I do, but I didn't know what that meant. I want to mean it now. I want to be free." The candle went out. The veil dropped behind me, and I felt her breath on my neck, cold, like the last wind before snowfall, like the final sigh of a bride before she walks down the aisle alone. She didn't speak, not with a voice. She spoke through the cold, the kind that seeped into your spine, uninvited and permanent, through the candle that extinguished itself without a flicker of smoke, through the sudden stillness of the air, like the world had taken one long breath and forgot how to exhale. I didn't turn around, couldn't. If I looked at her, if I gave her a face, she'd be real. And if she was real, then so was everything I feared I had become. My knees pressed into the dirt-stained floor of the abandoned chapel, right in front of the cake table. Not a speck of frosting on it now, just layers of sponge, each tear gray at the edges, beginning to rot. The cake had changed. It was no longer about celebration. It was a coffin, and I was its guest of honor. A second candle lit itself on the far end of the table, then a third, then another, until the entire altar glowed like a morning vigil. And beneath the flicker, I saw what I hadn't before. Each tier of the cake was engraved. Words carved directly into the sponge and fondant, faint and cracked with age. I leaned in. The top tier read, Lydia Monroe, July 2021, vows unheard. The middle, Colm Weston, fed her a lie. The bottom tier, Marin Caldwell, I do. But she didn't. My breath caught. My name. My date. I hadn't told anyone the cake bled. I hadn't told anyone I'd begun to doubt him weeks before the wedding. But she knew. She'd tasted it. Because the cake isn't made from flour and eggs and sugar. It's made from promises. From everything we pretend to believe. Behind me, the veil moved again. A whisper curled into my ear, like silk dragging across old wood. Say it again. I swallowed, tried to steady my voice. I do. But the candle nearest me snuffed out. Mean it. My mind spun back, to the moment Ezra slipped the ring on my finger. To the second I smiled through a rising knot in my throat. To the first time I thought, he loves the idea of me, not the wreckage underneath. I didn't marry Ezra because I was in love. I married him because I was afraid no one else would try. And she tasted every bit of that fear in the frosting. Flashback. 1 month before the wedding, Ezra left for a week-long work trip. He never said where, never called, returned with his eyes a little duller, with a bruise on his ribcage and a scratch on his shoulder blade. When I asked, he said, accidents happen when you leave the past behind. Now I wonder, had he tried to run from her too? Did he know what the cake really was? Or had he tried to offer me in exchange for his escape? I stood up from the floor, faced the cake. It was taller now, growing, like it wanted me to climb into it. I picked up the knife from the table, the same one I'd used on my wedding day, still stained with dried red. I raised it, and this time I plunged it deep, straight through all 3 tiers. The cake screamed, not loud, but inward, like grief with nowhere to go. Frosting split down the middle. Sponge tore open like ruptured skin. And beneath it, buried in the very core, was a face, I sewn shut, lips parted in a scream she'd never finished. Hair still pinned with bridal clips. Lydia. Her body didn't rot. She hadn't decayed. She'd been preserved, like a wedding topper, a keepsake. She wasn't missing. She was part of the recipe. Behind me, the whisper rose to a moan. The veil brushed my shoulder. My vision blurred. Suddenly, I was standing in Lydia's body. For a flicker, I felt everything. Her terror, her betrayal, her final scream echoing inside a cake she never agreed to die in. And then, I wasn't Marin anymore. I was the next line in the book. The candles flared. The cake collapsed into dust. And at the center of the table, in place of Lydia's body, was mine, draped in my dress, eyes closed, lips still whispering, I do. Layla burst through the chapel doors just then. I heard her cry out, but I couldn't move, because I was watching from behind the veil now. She saw me. She screamed. She ran toward the altar. But it was too late, because I was already fading, already part of the memory. The vow had been taken, accepted, consumed, and the frosting, that wasn't frosting at all. It was sealing wax. For graves. I couldn't feel my body, but I could see. I could see everything. I was hovering, not in the sky, not above the chapel, but somewhere in between now and then, between breath and memory. And in that suspended silence, I saw Layla screaming at the altar, saw her shaking me, my body, draped across the cake table like a discarded doll. I wanted to call out, to tell her I was still here, but all that came out was frost. She didn't hear me. Of course she didn't. She couldn't, because I wasn't in the room anymore. Not really. I was in her world now, the bride behind the veil, and she was showing me her collection. Time fractured, cracked open like the tears of the cake. And behind each crack, I saw another wedding, another woman, another lie. A bride in 1932, sobbing in a cellar after her husband vanished before the first dance. A cake toppled off the table, blood pooling beneath the icing. A baker in 1956, dragged into an oven after ignoring the rule to never reuse vows from the dead. A girl in 1984, found inside her own bouquet, thorns piercing through skin pale as fondant. All of them, different names, different dresses, same cake, same veil, same whisper after the cut. She tasted the lie. Flashback, my third date with Ezra. We were walking past a bookstore. He stopped in front of a dusty old bridal magazine display and said something strange. "You ever notice how every wedding is really a funeral in white?" I laughed. I thought he meant it metaphorically. He didn't. Back in the chapel, Layla reached for my hand. But something pulled her back. The veil, curled around her wrist, gently at first, almost tender, like an invitation. She screamed and yanked away. The veil clung, dragged, until she tore free and ran. And I saw it, a tear in the world, a rip in the veil itself. Behind it, a place beyond this place. Not heaven, not hell, something older. A hall of broken aisles, abandoned bouquets rotting in pews, candles that burned upside down. And at the end, the real cake, the first one, black as ash, 10 tiers high, cracked like dried skin, each layer engraved not with names, but with confessions. I married him to make her jealous. I said yes because I was pregnant. I knew he was cheating, but I was lonely. I didn't love her. I loved how she looked at me. Every tear bled. Thick, viscous, endless. And at its peak, her. Not a ghost. Not a woman. A bride made of vows. Hundreds of them. Torn. Sewn together. Mouths stitched across her torso. Hands made of rings. Eyes full of cake toppers and broken watches. Each one frozen at the hour of betrayal. And her veil? It wasn't cloth. It was hair. The hair of every bride who'd lied and fed her. She turned, looked through me, and smiled. Not with joy, with hunger. "You came back," she whispered. "That means you're learning." Her voice didn't echo. It settled. Into marrow. Into memory. "You wore the dress without knowing its weight. You spoke the vow without tasting the price. But now you see. Now you understand. Every bride owes something. And those who doubt their forever become mine." I fell to my knees, tears streaming, because I had doubted. Not Ezra, but myself. I said yes because I didn't think I deserved anything better, because I was tired of starting over, because I thought being chosen was better than being alone. And she knew. She always knew. She tasted it in the batter. Behind me a door appeared, ancient, carved with bone. A chance. But not to escape, to repent. Her voice curled around me again. "Finish the vow, or become the filling." I stood, hands shaking, stepped toward the door. Behind it I could feel a heartbeat. Mine? No, Lydia's. And others. Too many to name. All of them still beating, still trapped in frosting and silence. Waiting for someone to mean it, to undo what had been baked. Because here's the truth. The wedding cake doesn't just bleed. It remembers. And every time we cut into it, we're cutting into history, into guilt, into promises we never had the right to make. And she, the bride behind the veil, she feeds on what we forget. The door opened with a sound that wasn't quite a creak. It was softer, wetter, like flesh being peeled from bone. And the smell, it wasn't death. It was something worse, something preserved too long. Hope, left to rot. I stepped through, and the veil followed. It slithered beside me, brushing my hand, my cheek. Not like fabric, not like hair. More like regret with a pulse. Beyond the door wasn't a hallway, not a room. It was a space that wasn't supposed to exist. A hollow carved from broken wedding bells and shattered chandeliers. White petals floated midair, frozen, unmoving, like this place had swallowed time and decided to chew slowly. And at the center of it all, on a raised platform, was a cake pedestal. Empty, but not for long, because my name was already engraved into the silver plate. Marin Caldwell. Vow submitted. Incomplete. Tier assigned. Pending. A deep voice, female but splintered, like 30 brides speaking through the same cracked mouth. echoed all around me. Do you wish to complete the vow? I didn't answer at first. I was shaking. My body no longer felt mine, but something in me still beat with defiance. I didn't know what I was promising, I said. I didn't know what I was feeding. Silence. Then, you knew enough. You wore white when you should have worn ash. You said forever and laced it with fear. You offered your heart, while holding scissors behind your back. She was right, and I hated how right she was. Flashback. A week before the wedding, I was sitting in the parking lot of a bridal boutique, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Not crying, not smiling, just still. Ezra had just called to say he was going to be a little late again. That was the third night that week. He always had excuses. Work, family, errands. But there was a woman on his Venmo, a name I didn't recognize. I'd asked. He'd laughed, then kissed my forehead and said, "Don't ruin something beautiful just because it scares you." I had smiled back, but something inside me died that day. And now, she knew. A wall behind the pedestal lit up. Photos appeared. Polaroids. Hundreds of them. Each bride captured at the moment the cake bled. Some screaming. Some smiling. Some already gone. At the very center of the wall, my photo. My wedding day. Frozen as the knife pierced the cake. Crimson flooding the lace tablecloth. But it wasn't just blood in the image. If you looked closely, zoomed in, you could see a face reflected in the blade. Not Ezra. Not mine. Hers. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't about me. It never had been. It was about her vow. The original one. The one spoken and broken long before I ever said, "I do." Someone left her at the altar, maybe centuries ago, and she made a promise. If you do not keep your vow, I will collect all those who follow. I will take their words, their rings, their slices, until someone finishes what you broke. That someone was me. The air shifted. From behind the platform, a figure emerged. Tall, pale, face hidden behind a red-stained veil. But I knew her. Not from photos. Not from stories. From the pull. From the way the air bent around her. From the sound of teeth chattering in my pocket. I reached in and pulled out the tooth I'd found in my cake. Still warm. Still ticking. She held out her hand, and I placed it there. She closed her fist around it. And for the first time, she knelt. "You saw," she whispered. "And you didn't look away." I couldn't speak. Didn't know if I was supposed to. But she didn't need words. She needed something else. Another platform rose from the ground. A new cake. Just one tier. But untouched. Uncut. Snow white. Pure. Waiting. She gestured toward the knife. Not to stab. Not to bleed. But to serve. A real vow. A real promise. I stepped forward. Lifted the blade. My hands didn't shake this time. And as I cut into the cake, the inside shimmered gold. No blood. No bone. No memory. Only truth. Only love. Not the kind that makes you safe, but the kind that makes you brave. The pedestal glowed. The room warmed. And behind me, the wall of photos cracked, like glass releasing 1,000 trapped souls. I turned. She was fading, her veil unraveling into threads of light, her face still hidden. But this time I didn't need to see it, because she was finally free. And maybe so was I. But just before she vanished, she spoke again. One last line. Soft, clear, ancient. "The cake will never stop bleeding. But now, it bleeds for truth." I woke up in my bed. Alone. Sweaty. Crying. Whole. Layla sat beside me. Eyes wide. Lips trembling. "You were gone for 3 days," she whispered. I looked everywhere. I opened my mouth to tell her everything. But something on the nightstand stopped me. A box. Wrapped in silk. Inside, a single slice of white cake. And a card that read, "One day another will cut. Make sure they mean it. Because the curse isn't lifted. It's only waiting. And every vow leaves crumbs." I didn't touch the cake. Not at first. I stared at it for nearly an hour, my fingers hovering over the silk like it might bite back. The slice sat inside a small ivory box, the kind used for fragile ornaments or heirlooms passed down from broken grandmothers. The frosting was impossibly smooth. No smudges, no cracks. Too perfect. Like it had been waiting for me. Like it had watched me. The card was still resting on the lid. One day another will cut. Make sure they mean it. My fingers trembled, because I knew what it meant. The vow had passed through me, not ended with me. I wasn't released. I was commissioned. And the slice? That was proof. The final bite of a broken promise. One I was now the keeper of. Layla was watching me from the hallway. She hadn't asked questions yet. Not since I woke up screaming the name Lydia and babbling about a cake that bled memories. But now her voice was small, careful. Marin, what is that? I swallowed. A reminder, I whispered. And maybe a warning. We buried the slice. At midnight, in the garden behind Layla's house, where the roses grew in wild, anxious spirals. I didn't dig with a shovel. I used my hands. The soil was soft, too soft, like it had already opened itself in anticipation, as if others had buried their broken pieces here before. When I placed the box in the hole, the ground side, Layla said it was the wind, but we both knew better. Days passed, then weeks, but I couldn't forget what I'd seen, what I'd become part of, because the vow, it never really ends. It loops, a psychological spiral that chews its way back through generations, searching for the next person foolish enough to lie while wearing white. And I had tasted all of it. The cold frosting of betrayal, the sticky sweetness of fear, the metallic aftertaste of unspoken doubts. Flashback. After Ezra disappeared, I kept his wedding band in a drawer. I told myself I'd throw it away, but I couldn't. It wasn't about mourning him. It was about mourning who I became to survive him. And the cake reminded me of that, of every time I smiled through panic, of every kiss I gave without conviction, of every, I love you, said with my fingers crossed behind my back. Then, one morning, the doorbell rang. No one there, just another white box, this time smaller. Inside a photo, grainy, printed on thick paper, the kind you don't take digitally. The image was of a new couple, laughing, holding hands, standing in front of my old wedding venue. The caption was scrawled in red ink. Venue rebooked, cake order pending. My mouth went dry. It was happening again. She'd moved on, found new words, new frosting, a new pair of hands to tempt. But I hadn't forgotten the card. Make sure they mean it. I knew what I had to do. I called the venue, pretended to be a guest. Hey, I lost the invitation, but I know it's a late June wedding. The couple's names are Calvin and Brielle. Pause. Oh yes, the receptionist chirped. They just finalized the cake order today. It's a custom, 3 tiers, ivory floral design, classic almond and red velvet mix. Really beautiful choice. Almond, red velvet. My stomach turned. I knew what that flavor meant, what it masked. The same flavors Lydia's mother had chosen. The same Ezra forced me to taste. The flavor of complicity. I drove there, didn't tell Layla, didn't pack a bag. Just grabbed the only thing I needed, the vow book, the one from the chapel. It still pulsed faintly when I touched it. Still remembered every word ever broken under its weight. At the venue, I walked past the reception tent, ignored the florists, smiled at the planner. No one questioned me. Why would they? Brides always wear a certain kind of madness on their faces. And today, I wore it well. I found the cake in the prep kitchen. 3 tiers, smooth white fondant, sugar flowers curling delicately around the base. And at the top, 2 figurines. The bride smiling. The groom slightly turned away. His eyes didn't face her. They faced the door. That's how it always starts. I placed the vow book beside the cake, opened it to a blank page, took out a pen, and wrote, Brielle, I watched you kiss him with one eye open. Calvin, I heard you say, forever, like it was a question. Then, beneath that, in smaller letters, this cake isn't cursed. It's truth-fed. If you mean it, if you really, really mean it, cut gently. If you don't, run. Don't feed her another lie. Then I walked away. Didn't look back. Didn't need to, because the vow was still out there. Still hungry. But maybe this time, just maybe, someone would mean it. That night I dreamed of the veil again. But this time it didn't smother me. It wrapped around my shoulders. Like wings. Like absolution. And whispered, "Not everyone is meant to be eaten. Some are meant to warn." The invitation arrived 3 weeks later. Handwritten. Elegant. No return address. The ink shimmered faintly, almost pulsing. It read, "You are cordially invited to witness the binding of vows between Brielle Marin and Calvin Reyes, to be held at Hollow Pines Estate. Cake to be served at dusk." I stared at it for a long time. The handwriting, it was mine, but I never wrote it. Layla noticed it first. The lettering on the B, that's how you sign your name. I've seen it 1,000 times. She was right. But how? Had she used my hand? Had I already become part of the recipe? Or was I simply the final messenger now? The night before the wedding, I drove back to Hollow Pines. The venue stood quiet under a sky that looked bruised. Purple clouds, the moon and eye that refused to blink. Security had tripled since the last time. But I didn't need to sneak in. I belonged now. This story had my name stitched into every fold. I was the cracked tear between the lies and the bleeding. The middle. The moment of decision. The kitchen buzzed with last-minute chaos. Caterers rushing. Planners checking notes. And there, near the corner table, the cake. For tears this time. Pale pink. Gold accents. Beautiful. But I knew the truth. Underneath the frosting was not sponge. It was memory. It was mouths. And it was waiting. I didn't cut it. I didn't touch it. I just placed something beside it. A mirror. Small. Framed in silver. Cracked in the top corner. So that if Brielle looked into it, she'd see herself in fragments. The way the veiled bride had once seen herself. Whole on the outside. Shattered beneath. And on the mirror's back, I taped a note. "This cake remembers. If your heart is clean, slice carefully. But if you've ever kissed another with your vows still on your tongue, don't feed her." Then I left. Not out of fear, but peace. Because I'd done what no one before me had. I had made the vow mean something. I had buried the lie, not beneath frosting, but in truth. I never found out what happened at the wedding. Not really. But days later, I saw the headline. "Bride collapses at Hollow Pines ceremony. Wedding called off mid-vows. No deaths. No cake served. No blood reported." But no one could explain the scorch mark found on the cake table. No one could explain why the roses on the altar bloomed black overnight. And no one could explain the faint whisper several guests heard as they fled. "She forgives the brave. She devours the liars." Months passed. The story faded. As they always do, but the vow didn't, and neither did the cake. Because somewhere, in another town, another bride is smiling through her fear. Another groom is holding hands with someone he hasn't truly chosen. And another cake is being frosted with silence. I still have dreams. Of veils brushing my face. Of white dresses melting into rivers of ink. Of hands made of sugar reaching from inside tiered towers. And in every dream, I hear her voice one last time. "You can't stop the cutting, but you can teach them to taste the truth." So that's what I do now. I whisper warnings into bridal shops. I slide vow books into registries. I leave forks missing at rehearsal dinners. And when the cake is served, I pray just once. That someone looks at it and asks, "Why does this smell like sorrow?" Because once upon a time, a bride said, "I do," with fear behind her teeth. And it fed a hunger that never died. But once, only once, a vow was finished. And it was mine. The cake still bleeds. But now, it bleeds slower. And sometimes, it doesn't bleed at all. If you want more chilling true crime stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to The Veil of Secrets.